Greetings viewers and welcome back to the review program. In this episode we will talk about the gender equality in Uzbekistan. Before we dive into a more detailed discussion, my colleague has conducted surveys with the local residents about the most common stereotypes about the gender equality in the country.
For me, gender equality is when men and women have the same rights, when both can equally make decisions. In this modern world, I think there is a gender equality, but when it comes to Uzbekistan, I don't think so.
Ну, это, конечно, хорошо.
It is good to have a gender equality, but I think in financial planning, men should always be higher than the women. Uzbekistan is on the way to achieve gender equality.
В любых сферах жизни. Например, у меня семья, у меня жена.
I think men and women should have the equal rights in all spheres. For example, in my family, I cook together with my wife. I don't prevent her to do the job she likes. She has her own career, works in the big organization. In Uzbekistan, there is a gender equality, but to some extent. It is, I think, when everyone has the same opportunity. Males and females should have the same rights when it comes to personal life, career and study. I don't know about the situation here in Uzbekistan. Gender equality means for me having the equal rights and responsibilities between men and women. One of the advantages that comes with gender equality is that in my life my husband always listens to me, considers my opinions, gives advice and always respects me. Gender equality is when males and females have equal rights. In Uzbekistan there are still works to do to have equal rights and responsibilities.
Gender equality in Uzbekistan has seen significant progress in the recent years. The Women's Committee in Uzbekistan, which was established back in 2010, is the national machinery of women's issues and the key player in promoting gender equality. Women in Uzbekistan are increasingly taking up leadership positions in politics, challenging traditional gender roles and breaking down barriers to women's participation in decision-making processes. One of those significant achievements is women making up 30% of the members of parliament in Uzbekistan, surpassing the global average of 25% female representation in national parliaments. To discuss the gender equality in Uzbekistan, the way it has evolved over the time in the country, we have invited a special guest, Ms. Dilfuza Kuralova, who is the activist of human rights and gender equality. Good evening, Ms. Dilfuza. Thank you so much for dedicating your time for this interview. We're really glad to have you in our studio today.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
I would like to start off with the basics. How do you think has the understanding of people in regards to gender equality changed in Uzbekistan over the time?
Well, if we look to the history of gender equality in Uzbekistan, you must know that it has been different periods of gender equality or understanding of gender equality in Uzbekistan, right? So, first of all, we had in history, we know there were situations where women were forced to wear the wheels, and then there were a movement to take off the wheels, right? So then we had a Soviet time when women were equal as a man in terms of working conditions, social development, or social protection. And then we had independence. And during the independence, I think these traditional norms that either were created or constructed or moved from time to time, it shaped also gender stereotypes in the family, in perception of women in the politics or in economic development. And then I think maybe for the recent 6 to 7 years, the situation drastically changed because we see that women became more important and became one of the key policy areas of the government, since in our country decision-making is usually, I don't say that it's typically, but usually it's from top to down rather than from bottom to up, right? So therefore I think because gender equality became something that is discussed openly in the government, something that is discussed in a political level, this question became more popular and open. It's not a taboo topic anymore. So if we would ask anyone, I don't know, in 2015 or 16 or even earlier, people would not even talk to you because they will think that this is a something that is internally, something that family matters, and they would not like to talk about that. It's like a taboo topic, right? But since now there is a law, there are a lot of policies, top-level politicians and women in politics, they speak about that, and I think it became something that people can talk without any fear, and can push forward women's role in the society, and then get rid of the stereotypical understanding of gender roles. And adoption of the law of 2019 on gender equality, I think this is something that is pivotal for pushing this agenda in Uzbekistan.
Based on your observations, what are the basic and most popular stereotypes among people and maybe governmental officials in regards to that topic?
I think there is a clash of understandings, like when I talk with the government officials or I talk with the, people who make decisions, they all acknowledge and they say, yeah, of course, we need more women in politics, we need more women in judiciary, for example, or we need more women in decision-making positions, in economy, and etc. But at the same time, they want women to be like a robot. They have to do everything, right? So they say, okay, if you do everything at home, you have family, you have kids, you cook, you clean the house, and then you can, over top of everything, you can do your job. But they don't consider that some women may decide not to have this, like not to have a family, or concentrate on career, or concentrate on education, and then like do as men do. And then I think acceptance of this, it's very crucial for them, and they cannot do this. Second, I think when it comes to gender-based violence or gender equality, it's usually connected with the power relations, how you put yourself in the power. So am I powerful, more powerful than you or not? So if I'm man, I'm considered to be more powerful than women. So a lot of people cannot accept that women can be even more intellectual or more possible than men. So they don't accept it in reality, right? Because we have strong upbringing from childhood, I think when we become a professional, it's very hard for people to divide these professional skills with your personal principles and understandings. So if you take, for example, the case of Inabat, you have heard about her, this journalist lady. After discussing with her in one of the podcasts, she also explained that she faced a lot of hate toward herself, even among journalists themselves. While journalists have to be impartial, they have to be more open-minded, right? They have to see two sides, but you can see that professional skills and their personal understanding, they were merged. And they didn't see that this is what she strives for. She's against of gender discrimination. She follows the law, but she at the same time faces a lot of resistance, even from her own colleagues. So I think this is a main issue, that we have been brought from the childhood with the stereotypes. And then when you go to school, you also face these stereotypes. And then in the university, you have the same. When you go to work, for example, you are very open-minded. You come to work, and then your work condition is very stereotypical. So your work conditions say, in the discussion, women are not allowed to come, or you are considered to be a secretary, or taking the less leading or leadership position. Then it considerably, you also take these rules, right? Or it will be very difficult to change the environment. So either you give up, or you try to be eliminated by others. So that's why I think these kind of difficulties make gender equality fighters even more difficult to do their job. Also, I have to say that I really have an allergy to word mentality. Because when you talk about legal things, or as a lawyer, I don't think that mentality can be a reason to or justification of canceling of certain things or justification of not adopting certain policies or laws. I think this is something that people who cannot promote or really accept gender equality, they use the mentality as an excuse.
So cultural backgrounds cannot be the obstacle.
Well, this is an obstacle, actually. This is a very big obstacle. But when you truly say or adopt the policies, you should not use it as an excuse. You know what I mean? For example, you know that I was a part of the group on drafting the law on GBV, gender-based violence, that was like criminalization of domestic violence this year. And when we discussed with the decision makers or legislators or law enforcement, they were also using the excuse like saying, we can't criminalize domestic violence because of our culture, because of traditions, and because of the mentality. And then for me as a lawyer, it's very strange to listen to that because it means you don't want to criminalize domestic violence. Why? Because you justify the violence? Or you want to say that in our traditional habit, men usually beat women and then execute violence in their families, and this is a tradition or this is a mentality. No, it's not, right? Every man, whoever you ask and say, do you beat your wife? They say no. If you ask any mindful person, is violence justified? They say no. Then I have a question, why we cannot criminalize domestic violence, and then you justify it through the tradition, through the mentality. So this is illogical, right? It's not even discussable. So that's why I think it also shows that there is no true belief in gender equality. This is my conclusion. Solution is a behavioral change. And behavioral change usually takes decades. It's not going to be in 1 year, 5 years. Maybe it takes 10 years, maybe it takes 15 years, but then slowly but surely we're going. So if like 5 years, as you asked me from the first question, if you ever discuss gender equality in 10 years earlier, you would not be even allowed to do it, right? Maybe you will be in jail, I don't know. Now you can freely talk about it. Now we can discuss about it in front of cameras, and then we can freely talk about that.
How are men involved in this process?
I think men are less involved than they should be, in my opinion, because men also have to be feminine, right? Not feminine, but they have to support gender equality. But what I observe is that men's solidarity is more stronger than women's solidarity. This is what I observe. Like 2 men can be even stronger in their support to each other than 5 women. In my all working conditions or whatever I observe in any of the colleagues or societies, I see that women have this misogyny to each other, right? So they hate each other or they don't like to support each other. Like sisterhood is something that we lack of. And then brotherhood, like in men community, is much more stronger. So if you hate, do the experiment. You can hate one man among your colleagues. Believe me, everyone is going to support him. Even if they don't like him, they will support him. Try to hate a woman. Every woman come and hate her. I don't know why it happens. I have literally don't understanding why they do it. So this is my observation, and I think we have to more talk about that and say like sisterhood is something that will help us to build this resistance against gender inequality or gender discrimination.
So where is this going? How do you envision this in the future?
I think, you know, it's interesting. I think now we're at the stage of resistance because it was, again, top-to-down policy, right? The government said, now on, we have a gender equality. Now on, women have to be in key positions. Women have to have more power. And we have a lot of, not a lot of, okay, we have number of strong female leaders who are best examples and motivation for women to have a hope, right? We have head of the Senate, head of the President's administration, and some of the ministries that you see that women are really in the top positions, and then every girl in a village or in a university, they can also say like, oh my God, I want to be like them, because they are illustration that power can be held by female, right? Which is a good. But at the same time, I see that there is a resistance from the society, resistance by power holders, and resistance within the government as well to say like, no, 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 we're going to have female to tick the box. So we give them a position, but it will be very nominal. It will be artificial position that they will not be really decision makers, right? Just to have them. But at the same time, I think after maybe 5 years or maybe less or maybe more, I think this trend will be moving, and then there will be more quality-based or skills-based appointments and skill-based acceptance of women as well.
Recently, you have traveled to Hong Kong. Could you please talk about your experience? What are the particular moments that you have highlighted for yourself from the visit?
Well, I was in a fellowship program. It calls Asia Global Fellow. I was, I think, only representative from maybe Eurasia continent or former or CIS countries, let's say. And I did a 3-month research based in Hong Kong University. So it was very interesting for me. I did a research on civic engagement to push human rights in Asia. Because for me, it was interesting to see if there's a chance on classical, let's say, pushing of human rights in Asia, or it's not possible. If it's not possible, then what are ways we can do human rights in Asia? Because it's very difficult, right? Again, we have a lot of similarities, and then we have a lot of difficulties and obstacles, be it political regime or other cultural norms, as we discussed, because human rights is considered like something that is against of the government, or something that questioning all the time the decisions in law and etc. But on other hand, we have to understand that people who care, they do speak, right? So I do speak about human rights in Uzbekistan or gender equality in Uzbekistan because I love my country, because I love being here, and I want these changes in my country because I really enjoy living here. I really don't want to leave. And then that's why we're trying to make some changes to create more better conditions for all of us to live in more safer and more equal or more favorable conditions world or environment, let's say. So in Hong Kong, it was interesting that for me it was one of the things, very tiny spaces, and I really valued whatever we have in Uzbekistan, wide spaces, wide roads. The space is so small, it's like cement or glass jungle. You know, you have buildings which are like 70 floors or 80 floors. And then the smallest building, I think it's maybe 30 floors. So for me, it was something that really blew my mind. It was like, oh my God, it's so tiny, and there are a lot of people are moving around all the time. So yeah, this is one thing. Another thing, because it's a global economy, and then I thought when it came, I was like, oh, I'm in center of Central Asia, you know, Central Asia, and etc. And then when I came, I figured out like in big powers, we're very small. We have to acknowledge it, very, very small. If you take, Hong Kong is 7.5 million people in Hong Kong. If you take Beijing in China, Beijing itself is 20 million, which is 2/3 of Uzbekistan, right? So for me, it was like understanding of, yeah, in the global economy, we're very, very small in terms of GDP, population, territory, and etc. But at the same time, I've been asked one very interesting question in saying what we can give to the world. Okay, we can get a lot from the world, but what we can give to the world. And it took me a few days or a few weeks to discuss and then to think about literally what are our comparative advantage that we can give to the world.
What is the answer to your research?
The answer to my research is very interesting. So I've try to find out that in all Asian countries we have the similar trends or similarities. We're different, right? But at the same time we have very similar notions. Therefore, I think human rights is still, classic way of human rights, like protesting, freedom of expression, freedom of association, or other individual or collective rights are accepted in Asian countries very strictly. So, and I think there is the only way to push human rights in the classical way is in the conditions when classic way I say it, it's not possible. There's another way of doing it in a more softer position. Let's say it's civic engagement. And civic engagement has different tools, right? It can be public advisory council, participatory budgeting, it can be dialogue forums, or it can be some platforms where you meet annual meetings or quarterly meetings, and etc. So there are different ways of interaction between the government and society. So when the government and society can meet in the midpoint somewhere, there is a chance to push human rights, and then there is a chance to meet, respect, and then execute human rights. So there is a possibility, but you have to be very thinking outside of the box. You have to be creative, and you have to use different, let's say, ways of negotiating with the government as a civil society. From point of civil society I'm talking, right? So to be creative in order to be able to talk with the government to push the human rights. Because at the end of the day, government has ultimate power to execute, right? We do elections, we give the power to the elected people, and the government has this power, legitimate power. So at the end of the day, we have to convince them so they can work for the benefit of people. And then how to convince is a different ways. If the civil society or individual expert can come with a constructive dialogue, let's say, I don't like this, but I propose this. So if you come in this way with a constructive dialogue, criticism, and solutions, any kind of government will be open to listen to you. So they're also human beings. They're also living in this country, right? So they also care about people. So I think this is a matter of negotiations, and matter of convincing, and matter of being able to find a common solution that will be benefit at the end of the day to all beneficiaries, all people of the countries.
Thank you once again for such an interesting conversation, and we were really glad to have you in our studio.
Thank you so much, and happy coming New Year. Thanks.
Thank you, dear viewers, for watching this program, and see you in the next episodes.